A nation should adopt a socio-economic ideology of fascism. A country should not listen to neighboring states as they have their own motives and are not trustworthy. A nation should only help itself and not others. The source clearly states that fascism is the best ideology for a nation to develop. Additionally, it believes that a country should not trust any other nation because they could easily have ulterior motives. This source values isolationism. I know this because it states a nation should only value the safety of itself and should have no interest in cooperating or supporting other countries. This would also make the source anti-internationalist because it does not believe in participation in foreign affairs. A communist perspective on this source is that instead of private ownership, there should be public ownership. A capitalist would view this as too extreme, saying that the government should have less control of the market and the world should establish a global economy. An internationalist would have the perspective that we should all work on problems in the world instead of only focusing on ourselves. My stance on this source is that a nation should not choose fascism, but instead choose a mixed economy where the public sector and private sector have a comparable amount of power. A nation should participate in diplomacy with their neighbors, to the extent that they are not threatening the allies of the nation or the nation itself. A nation should put assisting their own people above helping other nations. The source states that fascism is the best ideology a nation can implement. I wholeheartedly disagree with this because the market is only allowed to operate under strict government control. This means no one stands on equal footing with the government. This can easily lead to rampant corruption since no one is there to stop them. Fascism is also defined by its brutal suppression of any opposition to the ruling party. This means the government is not for people and is undemocratic because any other party is going to be destroyed, leaving the citizens with only one choice. This is ultranationalist because the people of the ruling party are putting their own interests over any other views. This puts one group's ideas and forces them onto the state, making an extreme policy. Fascism's firm grip over the free market also leads to ultranationalism because, again, the party's interests are the end-all be-all. This means if you don't support the party's radical views, your company will cease to exist. A high mind of people that are fanatically loyal and fall into the picture of what a citizen should be will remain. Fascism and racism are often intertwined. The reason why this happens is because this socio-economic ideology puts authoritarian control in the hands of the government and allows for strict regulations with no consideration for the wants of the people. This appeals to the worst kind of people, who want to have uncontested power without the risk of the majority not supporting them. These people are against democracy because they hold extreme views that many groups of people will not vote for. This means that they have radical opinions that are usually based on hatred of certain ethnic groups in the nation. At the very least, fascism will lead to discrimination towards certain groups because of this. Fascism will also put their extreme goals over the economic stability of their country. I know fascism does this because the government will, by nature of their beliefs, pour more money into militarism, racist policies, propaganda, etc. The reason why a mixed economy is ideal is because it allows the private and public sectors to balance each other out, making sure neither side obtains authoritarian control of their nation. In a mixed economy, the state must hold elections and organize referendums before decisions are made. This will make sure the government does not put their interest over the people. The private sector will not be shackled by the government, but there will still be laws that are beneficial to everyone. These would be anti-monopoly laws, laws protecting human rights, laws protecting unions, etc. An example that shows the pitfalls of fascism would be Nazi Germany. The country put Lebensraum over their own citizens. They controlled the private market to such an extent that the only one ethnic group allowed to own businesses was the Aryan Germans and those who passed their devious eugenics tests. The German government, despite holding these people on a pedestal, still took advantage of them. This was seen when Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party started the People's Car Program, also known as Volkswagen. Many Aryan Germans contributed their hard-earned money to this program, expecting to receive a car and be able to drive on the new highways being built. None of this came to fruition. Hitler stole all the money from the people and dumped it into his military. The highways that were made never ended up being used by citizens because very few could afford a car. This shows that fascist regimes have no problem destroying the trust between them and the people. Another example would be Japan leading up to World War II. They also abused their centralized power over the population. They pushed heavy propaganda that Japan was the rightful ruler of Asia. They saw the rest of Asia as their form of manifest destiny, They gave children toy guns and swords to normalize the extreme militarism they would participate in when they were older. They put so much emphasis on achievement that grades were kept from students to decrease the risk of suicide. They dehumanized the Chinese. One commander during the Second Sino-Japanese War said that he felt the same way about killing the Chinese as he did killing pigs back in Japan. The Japanese army also committed one of the worst war crimes in history. The rape of Nanking showed how little regard for human life there was in the Japanese army. They first killed all the soldiers that surrendered, then they killed any man they suspected of being a soldier. That means anyone who had calluses or people who had blisters. These injuries could have easily occurred from regular work, but the army didn't care and murdered all of them anyways. Last, but certainly not least, they raped many women in Nanking. The people who were in the Nanking safety zone estimated approximately 1,000 rapes at night and countless more in the day. This shows that fascism can easily lead to ultranationalism, which can encourage horrific war crimes. A country should listen to their neighboring nations because it will lead to more peace in the world. A neighboring state may have their own interests, but diplomacy is still necessary. Without it, nations can start to fear the unknown, leading to conflict that could have easily been avoided. A nation does not always have to see their surrounding states as enemies. Alliances, trade agreements, and non-aggression pacts can start to align the interests of nations. A country not listening to their neighbors can easily lead to ultranationalism. This happens because the nation is putting their own voice above other nations to such a degree that they aren't even willing to listen to other nations. This can also lead to a weak economy because nations will resent the country for not cooperating on a global level. Therefore, a country can see harsher export tariffs, and it is less likely to receive foreign aid if needed. This leads to a worse situation for the people of the country because they will see everyone around them as enemies. Opportunities in foreign countries can be dismissed out of fear. If a government does not cooperate with other countries, then valuable information that could help a nation's peace and security could be lost. A nation must participate in international diplomacy because if their nation needs help and is threatened, then once they finally look to others for help, if they receive that help, the other governments are going to be less likely to listen to anything the nation has to say, as they did not listen to them. A nation can be trusted if both countries have the same ethnic background and the same goals. To not trust a nation in this scenario only serves to weaken the nation, as alliances make stronger nations. Alliances are necessary because nations that do align with each other are going to dominate countries with no allies. This is because two nations are going to be stronger than one nation. This policy is detrimental to peace and security because the nation is not listening to other nations. This could lead to the nation being in the dark on any attacks that might fall upon them. The best-case scenario where the opposing nation was not trustworthy and had motives that actively harmed the other country, even in this case. Diplomacy is still the best because you could still talk through differences and use treaties to convince the other country to be peaceful. No nation should just assume everyone around them is out to get them. This contributes to ultranationalism. I know this because if a country can convince the populace that everyone around them is an enemy or a future enemy, then they will see rampant militarism and atrocities against foreigners as reasonable action. For example, Joseph Stalin was warned by the Allies that Adolf Hitler was planning on betraying him. He did not listen to the Allies because the advice of foreign capitalist countries did not hold any weight in decision-making. This shows that not valuing the input of foreigners. Another example is Japan at the end of World War II not taking into account the United States of America also and her allies' offers for them to surrender. Japan simply dismissed the threats as a last-ditch attempt to get Japan to surrender, as America was scared of Japan. This goes to show how chauvinistic the Japanese were because at this point they had been forced out of China. They have even lost some of their own territory. If the Japanese government had listened to the United States of America, then the bombs would have never been dropped, and it would have led to a more peaceful conclusion to the war. The source argues that a nation should not help other nations and only focus on themselves. I do not agree with this statement because once a nation has covered its own needs, then helping on an international level can only benefit everyone. If a nation supports another country, then that nation will be far more likely to help the supportive nation in the future. Giving aid to a country can be as simple as lowering import tariffs or recognizing their sovereignty. These actions can be made without ignoring the needs of a country's own citizens. A nation should also contribute on the international level because it will make alliances stronger. Without support for each other, an alliance will fall apart quickly. Nations can write documents to align with each other, but supportive action is the only thing that can align nations. Nations should support nations in need because it protects the sovereignty and self-determination of nations. A nation that is economically and militarily stable is less likely to give up its sovereignty just to get basic needs. A nation that helps another nation without forcefully taking over said nation is virtuous. For example, the USA was the only nation with nuclear weapons at the end of World War II. They could have taken over many nations weakened from the war simply by threatening nuclear destruction. But they did not. Instead, they gave financial support to many countries protecting sovereignty and giving real backing to their pursuit of internationalism as they had the opportunity to rule the world and they did not. In conclusion, fascism is terrible. Instead, nations should have a mixed economy. A nation should listen to neighbors and seek out a diplomatic solution to its problems. A nation should help other nations in need if it has the capability.